Hello, everybody. And today we have with us Christopher Gardner. Christopher has a website, biocharisma.com, and you can go and take a look there at some of the work that he's been doing. Christopher, hello there. How are you today, my friend?
I am wonderful, Miss Louise. It's great to be talking to you.
Indeed. Biocharisma, that really fills me with a sense of vitality. Would you like to tell us a little bit about what that site's about and the kind of things that you've been up to recently?
Yeah, sure. Thank you. Biocharisma, if you can see the word, it's bio, which means life, char, which means things that are burnt, and isma, or bio, life, and charisma. And how the reason how these things go together for me is I've been living in Costa Rica for close to 10 years now, and I got really into the permaculture movement. I have a domestead, it's a permaculture homestead where I live in a dome, and I build really funky wood-fired stoves and ovens and pyrolytic retorts that convert all this biomass that I have on my property into usable carbon that is a wonderful soil amendment because in the tropics, there's no carbon in the soil. So to have good, healthy plants, you need carbon in the soil. So to me, to have healthy soil and to have a healthy life, where charisma is just the secondary expression of being healthy and happy and abundant and all that, it all kind of went together. So I saw the pun or the play on words in there. I was like, biocharisma. And plus, all my friends are always telling me how charismatic I am. So I felt like it was like the perfect, moniker for for what I'm doing and how I am. And yeah, it just seemed to fit perfectly. And people really respond well to it, like you did.
Yeah, no, I would say that suits you down to the ground. In fact, health from the ground up as well, because it really does
Yeah,
seem to tie in so many aspects which are fundamental, and health is obviously one of those things that, we can't do anything well in our life if we're not healthy, right?
precisely. So that's been, my life journey it started off with me being extremely sick. When I was born and how like the time and the age that I was in the 70s and stuff, I was apparently a pincushion for a bunch of vaccines and drugs and food that my body didn't really appreciate. So I had battled IBS and gut dysbiosis from right out of the gate, and to the point where it almost killed me at 4 years old. And then my whole journey of getting healthy has sort of prompted me to start with the very basics, which are our inputs like clean air, clean water, good food, and start from there, because I really see it, if our body isn't running as well as it can, it's very hard for our mind to express itself. And I really think the gift of humans is the healthy expression of their mind, which is, creative and spontaneous. So I noticed that for me, there was a correlation. Whenever my body was in disrepair, I wasn't myself. I wasn't charismatic. But every time my body was healthy and every time I had this extra energy, I could really be creative and spontaneous and do things that were a benefit to not only myself, but those that surround me. So I just see it as like a common sense thing. If your hardware is working correctly, then, your software will have more space to do what it needs to do.
Definitely, definitely. No, that's quite remarkable that you've managed to overcome so many illnesses, but of course see them as part of your journey to learning. And I think possibly that's what this is all about, no, is our journey to learning. What do you say?
Oh, absolutely. In permaculture, we have a saying that, the problem is a solution.
Yeah.
So, like, that goes back to the whole biochar thing. I have this great friend, Itai, and we were doing this project at Finca Luna Nueva, which, if any of you guys out there have ever bought whole food supplements, that's farm that supplies all the turmeric and ginger to the company. I'm blanking now. What is it called? I'll think of it in a second. It's a very large whole food supplement company, and New Chapter Organics, and we're driving from where we live down there in Costa Rica or up there, and it takes about 5-hour journey. So we were always just brainstorming, and I was telling him how much I hated turning over compost piles, and he brought up this whole notion of terra preta. I'm like, what's terra preta? And he's like, it's Amazonian biochar. And I'm like, what's biochar? And so, it was basically the problem of the tropics not having any dark soil was solved by Amazonian indigenous folk, thousands of years ago, where they would take all the carbon that was in the plants, all these great big trees and everything that was up in the air. They would do what the Germans call hugelkultur. They would cut them down so that they would lay on their sides, and then they would cover them with earth, and then they would put these massive like clay pot urns underneath the cellulose, and they would light these fires and do smolder burns underneath, so that basically everything would cook down, like all this biomass would cook down, and then they would just plant right on top of it. And they would have these huge tracts of land that would end up becoming very, very rich soil. So after the conquistadors came in there and accidentally wiped them out with their European diseases, when the fauna came back, or when the flora came back into the zone where all this new soil was, these trees just grew bigger and bigger and bigger than had ever been seen before, because now they had rich soil. And this is what we now know as the Amazonian rainforest, and this is why it has the greatest megafauna and flora on the planet. And I was just mesmerized about hearing that. And then also on the backside of it, I was so happy that I never had to flip another compost pile in my life, because that's like I have a lazy streak in me, and I absolutely hate being out in the humid weather flipping, all this biomass to try and get like very little volume of usable soil. So there you go. There was the problem. The problem was there's no carbon in the soil, and we need to grow food. So how do we fix it? We go ahead and convert what is readily available into exactly what we need. And so that's the type of ingenuity that like permaculturists and inventors really appreciate. So, yeah.
No, that's fascinating, Christopher, and I think that could well be a subject in itself to look at for one of our sort of bite-sized takes on some of the things that you're actually doing, because I'm sure that you could offer some advice for people who want to improve the health of their soil wherever they live. I can imagine this is something relevant, even if you're not living in the tropics.
Oh, I'm doing an initiative. Like today, I'm building a pyrolytic retort, which to explain to people, all a pyrolytic retort is it's a vessel that you fill with biomass. So biomass is just clippings, just yard clippings. It could be grass. It could be, if you cut down a tree, the wood from the tree. If you have property or you're near property, which is everybody, there's always extra biomass, leaf litter, all this type of stuff. You go ahead and put it in the vessel, and a retort keeps the outside atmosphere from getting into the inside, and you heat it. And what ends up happening if you heat it efficiently is you end up with biochar. And this is something I'm making these on a personal level, where every time a person, say, is cooking a pot of beans or making rice or whatever, every time they cook, my goal is, or every time that they use my little device, they'll actually be producing soil. So that's where the moniker from the ground up comes from, health from the ground up comes from, is like, I want to stack the functions of every time you cook, you're also producing soil, or at least a carbon soil amendment. And it's turned out to be wildly popular here. I think I have like 16 orders for these things, because I'm finding that most people are like me. They don't want to be flipping compost piles. So this is something where, in my mind's eye, I really want to get into what's called the urban permaculture scene.
Yeah.
Where you can go into cities. Like you could do this, like you could have one of these little devices, like if you're grilling a couple of steaks on your balcony at the same time that you're grilling your steaks, bam, you have biochar. And then you can have your little micro garden on your balcony where you're growing, your sprouts and you're doing these types of things. And, very quickly you're converting something that would go into a landfill, you're converting it into carbon. Then you're actually feeding yourself, and then you get to get into the life cycle of things. I think people focus too much into the death cycle of things, where in the life cycle you can grow some plants, you can eat those plants, you get to experience, the green thumb that's almost hidden in all of us, and in that way you can really have a positive impact, not only on your own health but also on your wallet. I don't know how people survive in the Western world trying to buy all this organic food, because whenever I go to the States or Europe and I'm trying to eat organic, I just can't afford it. Like, it's just like you have to be wealthy essentially to be able to eat, a good diet. And so the more people actually get into their own food sovereignty and say they're able to produce 30 to 40% of their own dietary needs, which anybody can do in a micro garden, you're going to be so much better off on every front.
Yeah, that's so relevant as well, that what you're doing there in Costa Rica can also be translated for people everywhere, even in urban conditions, because this is incredibly empowering if we can find our own food source. As you say, food sources generally are deteriorating anyway, for reasons I think we understand.
Mm-hmm.
And on the other side of the coin, what is available, if indeed it is organic, I know it's as organic as it can be under the sort of steady barrage of chemical warfare that we seem to be under. But at least it's providing people with something that they can have confidence in, and also just literally get their hands back in the soil again. I think that's incredibly therapeutic too.
Oh, it's incredible. There's so many things now that we're inundated with all this extra electromagnetism, like all the electro pollution. You and I went to, I always want to call it, Madagascar. For some reason, I have the hardest time remembering the name.
Gibraltar, I think.
Gibraltar. And we saw that gentleman from the University of Sweden or Oslo or whatever it was.
Ole Johansson, yes, I've
Ole Johansson, and that was like one of the scariest things I ever heard, where he was talking about the electro pollution and how every year the amount of microwave radiation that we absorb, it doubles. So science has no idea about how biological systems being inundated with all this extra microwave radiation, what is really going on. But the latest research shows that type of radiation actually causes our DNA to fracture. So to me, I don't think that technology is by any mistake. I feel like the people in the know this. And so that makes it even more important for us to ground out. And so it's very well known that if you're being positively ionized by microwave radiation, you can diffuse that just by getting your hands in the dirt. If you get your feet on the ground and your hands in the dirt, you can be in some of the worst electromagnetic smog ever. And your body will naturally take on the negative charge of the planet, which is we have a net negative charge that keeps us healthy. So they find as people get older, their charge goes from net negative to neutral, then to positive, and that's essentially when you die. So for me, like, it's just so therapeutic. Like, my last name's Gardner. I didn't start gardening until I was like 35 years old, because I'm an idiot. But but the second I started to do it, like, I felt so much better. Like, it's just like, whoa. And it's not just like playing with plants. It's like my body is absorbing this net negative charge from the earth. And so anybody can do this. Like, anybody can do this, as long as your feet can touch the ground. you can ground out and start to allow the excess positive charge that we're absorbing all the time. You can allow it to, move through your body and out. And then when you're playing with plants, when you're playing with any other biological organism, your body will start to diffuse its positive charge, which, as we progress into the world of cellular technology, that's going to be absolutely essential for our health.
Yeah, it strikes me, Christopher, as I'm listening to you, that in a funny way, what we're up against, the way that we're being sort of dismantled and dismembered and destroyed in so many ways, at the same time is propelling us to take a whole new look at life and understand what that's really about. And a lot of the old sort of paradigms and ideas that have been encrusted on us are also falling away, being stripped away. So there's this kind of parallel dynamic going on. It's almost as if there's a race. It's life and death race in a way.
Yeah, the historical precedence is that nature is predatory, and a lot of people don't like hearing that. And I'm not saying this from a fear perspective. I'm just saying our ancestors had to deal with weather. They had to deal with traveling. They had to deal with diaspora. They had to deal with kings and monarchs and Genghis Khan. Like, there's never been a point in history where we were safe. And I know that sounds very ominous, but when you look at things historically, you go, oh, wait a minute. Humans throughout all of the millennia that they've ever been around have faced adversity. And so when you come to terms with that and you don't feel like a victim, you're like, wait a minute, I am the genetic outpouring of survivors. I fucking survived. Just the fact that we're here and that we get to talk, and like you're in Spain and I'm in Costa Rica, I mean, that's a blessing, So I think a lot of times when we become aware of all the threat that's around us, there's sort of a tendency to go, woe is me, oh my God, how could the things be so terrible? But the truth of the matter is, when have we not been under threat? Like, when has there been a time in history where there hasn't been some sort of predation that's going on? It's just that the predation that's occurring now is a little bit more obscured, like it's hidden, and the democide that's being perpetrated is just it's just not so overt. But the truth of the matter is, the parasites always are killing the organism. So whether you contract parasites like Papillomalia in Costa Rica and that thing's trying to kill you, or you have, flatworms in your gut and that's trying to kill you, or, you have some politician that's trying to kill you by, inflating things that don't need to be inflated. The whole thing is, we've always been under predation. So fuck off with your negativity. We've actually gotten here because we're survivors. And so you anchor into that survivorship. You anchor into the capacity to innovate. And you go with that. You run with that. Because if you're always focusing on the negative and how terrible things are, it's going to drag you down, and then you're just letting those people that would take from you, you're really letting them take from you. At that point that you're in that negative mindset, you have been crushed. They have won. So the beauty is like, I find that there's this neat little crossing road with health, is that you get to a certain level of health, then you're not willing to compromise. Then you go into this non-compromisable state, and then you start to produce things that will actually promote more and more health in you. And then you start to attract different types of people around you. And then as that whole thing starts to meld, then you actually have like this little bubble of love that can actually exact positive change on things. This is the way it's been forever. There's never been a time it hasn't been like that. So I let myself go on a negative soapbox, for I'd say a good few years after 9/11 and things like that. But the more I'm in an environment that's conducive to my health, and the more I disengage from societal habits that would lower my capacity to survive, the more abundant I feel, the more abundant I am, the more innovative I become, and I start to meet other people that are like that, and then everything just grows from that. So I'm not under the illusion that it's all for naught and oh my God, woe is me. Like that victim mentality doesn't really suit anybody. I haven't seen it suit anybody yet, so I've chosen not to go that route.
No, I totally agree. And you made so many great points there as well. And I can't say that any of it is ominous. I think it's a realistic approach, you know. I think that it's really good to look at what we have and name it as well. A lot of people seem unable to name it or afraid to name it, and really take a look at it and run with it, as you say, rather than run away from it. Actually use it as a mechanism to transform and to uplift and to move further. I suppose that word adversity as well springs to mind, that's
Right.
something that we need. We need a challenge. I mean, we're certainly confronted with challenges, but to be able to face it with a level of excitement and a level of joy even, you know,
Mm-hmm.
I think is very much the way to approach this whole situation that we find ourselves in.
Yeah, I find that people that are in the parasite mode, they're extremely dull. They might be very cunning, and they might have the capacity to have control mechanisms that seem very clever, but they're never innovative. And what I find is people that are coming from, like, say, source, people that are tapped into what sponsors their soul. You know, you could call it God, you could call it whatever. But when people are in that mode, they're infinitely innovative. And the parasite is never innovative. The parasite does one thing: consume. You
Yeah.
know, it just eats life. That's all the parasite does. But life in itself is always adapting and always finding a way to survive. You know, it's like Jeff Goldblum in Jurassic Park. You know, life finds a way. And it's really true. Like, look at all the adversity that you know we've gone through in this world, and look, we're still here, we're still kicking. So
Yeah.
I see us as, you know, as resilient as roaches. You know, we keep multiplying, and we keep you know, you can't kill us with the aerosol sprays. We call that raid. You can't kill us by smushing us. Like, it just keep going and going and going. So it's I'm pretty stoked about things. And another thing that I've seen is like how actually abundant the world is. Like, there's if people just learn a few fundamental things, they will tap into the natural abundance of the world. We've had this veil pulled over our eyes of scarcity. We're told that everything's scarce, like from diamonds to oil to food to water to air. And one of my mentors, she's a very, very bright doctor. Her name's Dr. Jennifer Daniels.
Mm.
She went to Wharton Business School. And she said, like, literally from the first day that you're in Wharton Business School, the goal of Wharton Business School is to sell everything. That's the goal. That's the end all of the business of the like pro capitalist model of the world. Constant growth and sell everything. So that means selling air, selling water. They want to sell it all. Well, to sell something, you actually have to make it scarce. Yeah, you actually have to, like, say, oh, look, there's not a lot of this. Like, look, whatever. And that first starts with ideas. And the truth of the matter is, that's total bullshit. Like, the level of clean water that we're drinking today is so much greater than 100 years ago. Like, the level of clean food that's available, the level of different fuels to do all the different things are so infinitely more available now than ever in our time in history. And so, but we're all under this assumption, oh my God, the sky is falling. Oh, there's no food. There's no this, and this. And it's all, there's a key to unlocking all this stuff. And the first part of that key is like recognizing, oh, I've just been told a story. And this story is not for me. This story is actually a story for the policymakers. This story is a lie. And then actually look around their natural environment and then take the initiative to learn whatever bioregion somebody's in, to learn their terrain. And I've been in the high desert. I've been in the tropical rainforest. I've been in the semi-tundra of northern Canada. Like I've been in all these different terrains, and everybody finds in those terrains ways to survive, and not just survive, but like actually have an enjoyable life. So show me where there's scarcity. Obviously there's areas that are engineered scarcity, but this is where a little bit of intelligence and the people that would be listening to this will start to recognize, wait a minute, I can actually, if they have the capacity to hear these words, then they have the capacity to become aware of their environment and then transduce all these different commodities that are around them into something that actually will help benefit them and their friends and family.
So that's interesting, Christopher. Let me take you there a little bit. If you are actually living in an area that may well be classified as sparse or barren, be that a kind of urban area or possibly an area that's been devastated for some reason, war or big agriculture or something like this, what, from your perspective, would be the kind of areas to look at, be it soil, water? You tell me, where do people need to go to start with to actually change this story so that make-believe becomes a reality, their reality? How do they change their reality?
The number one thing is to really be clear on what you're addicted to. So what I've seen in cities is people are addicted to entertainment. And the very first thing somebody has to, like in any type of recovery process or any type of cleansing process that you do for your body, it's first a reducing of inputs. It's not an increasing of inputs. So in the West, because the West is trying to sell everything to you at all points in time, it's always saying, oh, take this pill, take this drug, do this, do this, do this, when it's actually the opposite. They find the number one thing that upregulates people's gene expression is the reduction of inputs. So if you want to get healthy, fast for a week. For real. Your body will start healing itself in so many different ways because there's this thing called a hormetic response, where a hormesis is when you have a stress that induces upregulation of your genotype. So most people that I know that live in cityscapes that are extremely unhealthy, they're highly, highly addicted to entertainment. So I like with my clients that live in cityscapes, I go on an entertainment fast and see and actually watch if you actually need to live in the city. Almost any job that can be done in a city now can be done remotely anywhere because of the internet. Like if you're living in a city, it's not because you're doing manufacturing jobs or anything like that. You're there for entertainment. And so people need to get really honest about that. You can look at the majority of the philosophers that said anything meaningful, and they really harp on a mind that is obsessed with entertainment will never ever come into fulfillment. So I really ask people to look at what creates fulfillment in their life. And if being entertained is what gives them fulfillment, I'm sorry to say they're living in the Roman Colosseum. They're living in a structure where they're just watching the gladiators, get eaten. So guess what? If that's what you're giving your attention to, you're being eaten also. So there's a function of intelligence that has to kick in here. And I might sound elitist when I say this, but if you're too stupid to know what's being done to you, and this is, by the way, this is what the elites think about, people that don't recognize what's happening to them. I mean, this is literally Roman law, and the Roman law stipulates, like, if you're too dumb to know what I'm doing to you, you deserve it.
Yeah.
And so I really get real with people and I say, look, if you're in a city, more than likely your job can be outsourced anywhere. Your job and what you're doing, how you're having an income, you can do that remotely. Like that's being shown all throughout the world. So if that's the truth, why are you in the city? If you know that the city is actually bad for you, like it's antithetical to your biological organism, and you also know that you can do your work remotely, why are you there? And by the way, cities are much more expensive to live in than, any other areas, right? So you're not receiving any other benefit. And it almost invariably comes down to people's addiction to entertainment. They want to go out, they want to be in the social scene, they have all their, meeting things in clubs and bars, and, it's just about being titillated all the time. So to me, a part of becoming a mature individual, of actually becoming somebody that is an adult, and I'm not talking about an adult in biological age, I'm talking about an adult in chronological age and psychological age, is you have to let go of being entertained. The time of cartoons and playing with Muppets and all this crap is over. If you're an adult and you're listening, you have to really get real with what your addictions are. So I find that people that face their addictions naturally move out of cities. It's really that simple. It's so simple. Everybody that I know that's gone through like a 12-step process, getting over their sugar addiction, getting over their entertainment addiction, they all naturally leave cityscapes. So that would be my first step.
That's so interesting, and I think it will even it even leads me to reflect, on my life and where I live. So it's pretty far away from any source of entertainment, but it really brings up a lot in terms of addiction and also the time, the usage of time. And I know we've discussed this before. No, Christopher, this waste of time. I'd like
Right.
just to pick up on that, because this idea that of wasting time and why that
So
might be. Yeah.
this to me is like the most, like, this is probably as deep as my philosophical mind will get. But I really believe our soul is the gift of time that God gave us. That's just my way of seeing life. Like if I am a continuity, if my memory and my movement through space and time is a continuity within the time domain, and I would say all of that, all of my actions and thoughts and everything that I've done would be culminated into my soul. I really have to look at my soul as the gift of time. So with my soul being the gift of time, to waste it is to waste the gift of God. So what I've seen is most of the Western world, which is now being, grafted onto every part of the world, is really obsessed with wasting people's time. So our time is wasted through things like inflation. Like, a lot of people don't know about inflation, but inflation's a tax that doesn't need to be there. So you work more and more and more to get an output that gives you less and less and less. Well, that's wasting your time. That's that's a parasite. That's something that's actually pulling from you and giving you no benefit. And I want to be clear on what a parasite is. Parasites and parasitical systems are things that leave no benefit to your system when they're in your system, but do nothing but they benefit from you being there. They could not survive without you being there. So they're wholly dependent on you, and you are not dependent on it at all. So I believe that 99% of the world is good-hearted and non-parasitical, but you have these policymakers and you have these systems in place that are parasitical, that know that they're worthless. They know it, and they're insecure about it. And so they spend obscene amounts of money and have these long-winded strategies to really convince people of their need of them.
The
And
dependence. Yeah.
their dependence, and it's laughable because it's all a waste of time. Because in truth, we don't need it. Like, we don't need a Queen of England, like, ooh, the monarchy, or we don't need a Pope, oh, he's our direct channel, like all these things. But you look at all the pomp. Like, I was just watching the show last night of the presidential speech, right?
I hope you
or was
weren't
that called?
wasting your time.
No, no, but it was so great. It wasn't a
Yeah.
waste of time because what I noticed is that in the State of the Union address, how they have the semicircular bowl that's focusing everybody's intention on this one figurehead, that's the president.
Uh-huh.
And what do? They're always congratulating themselves before anything is actually said. And then what they actually say is nothing but rhetoric. None of it's factual. And if there is something factual, it's probably like 1/10 of the percent of what's actually being said. And then most of the time that's proven out not to be true. But the whole thing is a show. It's just the royal court, just rebranded, like the presidential speech or whatever. It's just, if the king or the queen was to say something a few hundred years ago, and it's all there with all the flair and all the nice clothes and all the ornate bullshit that's going around just to give the illusion that what these people are saying is actually significant. And it's not. It's a big fucking waste of time. And this is what I'm saying is people are so entrained to want to be entertained. And I'm actually writing an article about this right now, is that I'm watching the whole obsession that children have with screen time. I'm watching these little kids on iPads and tablets and all this type of stuff where they have no time for synthesis. So they can go from one piece of media to the next piece of media to the next piece of media, and just their mind can stay occupied like forever, where they don't ever have time to stop and then go play in nature and then actually synthesize the data that they've been given. Right?
Yeah.
Well, on the adult scale, this is the biggest way our time is wasted, is that we're inundated with constant information. And when you're inundated with constant information, this is an addiction. And so you really don't have time to synthesize anything. And what I notice is that when people are in that constant information gathering mode and they don't allow for synthesis, their mind breaks. They become a single hemisphere thinker. They can't really adapt, right? And since the world is always changing, if you don't have the capacity to adapt, you're pretty much out. You're out of luck, right? So with the whole time wasting thing, I personally know my time is the most valuable thing to me. Like, I have engineered my life where I have time to synthesize. I don't overwork. I don't overplay. I don't over research. I don't overdo anything. I give myself the right balance of things so I can be happy. Because as an only child growing up, I knew I had time to synthesize. And it really allowed my mind to flourish, right? So I'm really big with my clients and my friends and stuff like that. Like, I naturally want them to be happy, and I naturally am trying to unplug them from extraordinary amounts of data, or give them data that will unplug them from all this, extraneous stuff, so that they can actually have time to synthesize and relax into the moment.
I would like to give space for all those thoughts to sink in because it because they're so profound. I find them profound. And space is actually probably another thing that we waste, a waste of space. We occupy space in the same way that you're illustrating so well, that we occupy our minds, no?
Yeah.
And that in turn to me means we waste our life because we're caught up in all these other externalizing situations and the whole kind of worry syndrome. But I'm also wondering if since you were talking about the way you approach your clients and your friends, what are you finding to be the most effective way, Christopher, to get people's attention and to bring them back onto the track of health, and also with the information that a lot of the people that are listening, I know, carry, that they want to try and share with others. Often they meet with resistance. What are your ways of trying to, I'm not sure if it's influence people, but perhaps direct them into a more healthy environment?
Well, the first thing this was a hard lesson to learn, but I don't say anything to anybody unless they ask me
Good.
at least a few times. So I don't assume that people want to hear what I have to say. I wait, and I lead by example. So, I live on a farm where I'm trying to grow my own food. I'm trying. I'm just giving it a good college try, as I say, right? And I don't propound to have all the answers, but people know that I'm sincere and that I'm authentic in what I'm doing. So that generates questions. And if they ask me and if I think they're sincere, this is another thing, is like, I am a really, really good bullshit detector. And there's a lot of people that are asking questions just to hear themselves, they'll ask you a question just so that they can say something. So let's just say a person makes it through all those filters where I'm not wasting my time and actually interacting with them, because I do find my time is extremely valuable. The first thing I teach people is to really value what their wants and needs are. The people that I find that are sort of swimming in the quagmire of indecision, it's really they've been confused, and in their confusion, they're not clear on their desire set, or if they do have a desire set, they feel guilty about it. So one of my favorite authors is Dr. Christopher Ryan, and he calls himself a shame exorcist, and I love that moniker. Like, I try and take the shame away from people's positions so that they don't feel guilty for where they're at, because I find that guilt is really a massive hindrance for growth. So that's the first thing I do. And then from that point, that's the psychological, because like if you don't address the psychology of something, you're really not going to make a connection with somebody. And then from that point, I get into the body, and then it's specific, because different people have different traumas. So I have a really good support group of doctors and friends and therapists that all have like their own specialties. Like they can get into all these different facets of people. And then we fix the hardware of the body. And then as the hardware of the body gets healthier and the person starts to feel their vitality come back and feel their energy rise, then real work can get done. Real change can happen. And so that's usually my initiatory process. The days of me like trying to like beat people over the head with the club of truth were I wouldn't say were effective. And in all honesty, I wasn't really coming from a clear space when I was in that space. Nowadays, I really value my own time. And so I don't want to waste anybody else's time. I really want to give them something that they can put into action where they'll see immediate results. Because one of the things that's occurring that I see a trend is, if people don't get an immediate result in today's world, you've lost them forever. So it's forcing me to adapt in a way of where, like, instead of like having these really long-term approaches that I used to have in the past, I have to kind of give a person a cookie like right off the bat. And then once they have that, and once they feel, oh, okay, this person is effective in what they're talking about, then you can move forward.
Yeah, that's really helpful to point that out, because I think this will help others not waste their time, and just consider also the state of mind and the state of being that they themselves are in, as they approach anyone or anything actually, but to sort of think about themselves first. That seems essential.
Right.
Yeah.
And this is a problem I had when I first started teaching, because I've been a coach ever since I was 17 years old, like in football, and specifically with field goal kicking, because I did that in college and a little bit in the pros. And field goal kicking is very specific because it's all about focus. Like, that's what you're actually coaching, is focus. It's not the mechanics, there's all different ways of doing it, but the mechanics of focus is the primary thing. So then I parlayed that into teaching people how to meditate and how to do yoga, which is all focus. It's all about the capacity to hone in on a single point. And then once you hone in on a single point, then you can get a lot done. And so what I find now is there's so much information out there, it diffuses attention. And so to be able to learn how to quickly get somebody into single focus has been a real it's been a real hard and arduous learning process for me, because the way I learned it isn't the way I can teach it today. There's just not enough time per se, or at least that's the way it's perceived. Like you have to be able to adapt. And so I just taught a massage workshop, and it was really kind of cool because in the people that were in the workshop, everybody learned differently and everybody had different bodies, and they all expressed their energetics differently. So my old school way would have been like, okay, you're all going to do it this way, and this is the way, and rah, rah, rah. But I adapted. Like, I was like, oh, okay, you definitely need to be a Thai masseuse. Oh, you definitely need to do trigger point release. So you definitely need to do, cranial sacral. Like, it was obvious. So I think that because we live in a soundbite culture and people are moving faster and faster and are inundated, we have to kind of change our tape speed. Because if we don't change our tape speed and we're in the troglodyte era in our minds, then we're not going to be able to touch those people that are wanting to be touched, if that makes any sense.
Totally. And also it speaks of diversity. Again, as much as many aspects of our civilization, so-called at the moment, is trying to make us conform and, be uniform, at the same time, the opposite result seems to happen.
Right.
That that there's more evidence of more diversity. I mean,
Oh, it,
you must see that in the area that you live in, particularly, right?
That's the number one thing that the rainforest has taught me is that. So where I grew up in Florida, they had, the big citrus industry. They call it the Sunshine State, and they would have an orange on all of our license plates, So whenever my family was taking me up to Epcot or Disney World up in Orlando, we would drive for a few hours through the orange groves, right? And they're all monocrop.
Yeah.
So at the same time you see the monocrops, you also see the crop dusters, and you're breathing in all the fucking pesticides and artificial fertilizers, and all those trees are gone now. They've all died, and they can't replant them because the soil is terrible. So I moved to Costa Rica, and I go into primary rainforest, which is rainforest that's at least 100 years old, because where I live, there's an escarpment that goes from 1,000 feet of elevation to 3,000 feet of elevation, and it has a grade of 72%. So even when the conquistadors came through here and leveled the place, and then the cattle herders came in here and leveled the place, this one escarpment hasn't been touched because it would just been way too difficult to get the trees out of there. And it's literally magical. Like in the middle of this is a waterfall that has a 600-foot drop. So you walk through this old primary forest, and it's mind blowing. The diversity. Like, you have trees on top of trees on top of trees on top of trees with vines and moss and all this stuff, and then you have every single bug you could ever imagine. And the reason why everything is healthy, the reason why that everything can stay in this balance, is because they are different. These are not the same species. These are all different species, and it's almost like the competition from different species creates a stronger hormetic response, which creates a much stronger forest, right? So when I see how corporatism comes in, and you have this whole thing where, when I was in France 2 years ago, I saw McDonald's and Burger King and KFC. I was like, are you kidding me? Like, really? I'm not here, by the Eiffel Tower to see this shit. I don't want to go to a Starbucks. I want to have a really pissy French person, feed me a cappuccino and a baguette with real butter. I don't want, corporate whatever. So I personally have a disdain for the globalization of these franchises, in the sense, because it makes us a monocrop. It makes us, everywhere we go, every airport we fly through, or like if you're in the United States, you drive from state to state to state. When I was a kid, it was always fun. You'd drive into Georgia and that was different. You drive into South Carolina, that was different. Now it's all like every stop has, a Cracker Barrel and a McDonald's and this and this. And it's like the mom and pop places go away. Well, that's the death of diversity, which means that's the death of the healthy rainforest. It's all like a mirror in consciousness. And so, I personally like to promote diversity. And here's another thing about this, and this might be sort of, politically incorrect, but I'm naturally politically incorrect. Yeah. I don't believe in trying to force mix things. Like, so, the diversity is wonderful, especially if you're not, like, like, I know there's a lot of things going on with the refugee crisis in Europe, and I have friends that are directly affected by that, and there's a forced mixing that's going on. I'm not saying that diversity should actually come from forced mixing. I'm saying, like, here I see this really beautiful thing where, birds will eat, fruit from one tree and they'll fly over and they'll poop out the seeds and then a tree will start to grow over. That's like a natural way in which diversity can occur. But when you like try and force something, you take in a species that isn't indigenous to the area, and then you add it to the area, and then it ends up becoming parasitical. I don't subscribe to that type of diversity.
No, it's distorted. Yeah.
Exactly. So I think in the current political climate where the policymakers really big government benefits from chaos, and so by forced integration and forced diversity, that isn't the type of diversity that I promote. Like it's a permaculture design thing. Like, you plant plants that are complementary to each other, that aren't fighting each other. So we always plant an herb with a flower with a fruit. And we call this the guild. And why is that? Because in the soil, the way the roots will interact with each other, one's giving nitrogen to the roots of the other one is giving pollinators to the other one that produces the fruit. And nothing takes from the other, right? They're all giving to each other. So it's a win-win-win type of situation. And the type of diversity that I see in a lot of from the political arguments that are out there, it's not a win-win-win. There's a win, lose, lose, lose thing that's going on. And that if people can just take a step back and be more generalist in the way they see things and look at it from a broader perspective, government always benefits from chaos. And so, it just allows people to give up more and more of what they hold valuable in the name of being secure and safe and all this type of stuff. So I just wanted to be clear about that's the type of diversity that I'm into. I'm into the complementary win-win-win. And the best way I could actually think of that was like when I was in Amsterdam. I love that city. It's like one of my favorite European cities. And no, I wasn't like high or anything, but like in Amsterdam, I remember just sitting in the middle of Amsterdam at a cafe, and I just saw so many different people from different countries that were okay being what they were. Like, I saw Africans okay being what they were. I saw Germans okay with being who they were. I saw Americans okay with being who they were. And it wasn't like everybody was trying to dress the same. It wasn't like people weren't trying to like force their integration. It was more like, oh, wow, you're so cool because you are different, which is like the total different. It's like the exact opposite of globalism. which is like, oh, we're all so cool because we're the same. And that's what the rainforest has taught me, is that, man, this is so awesome because everything is so different.
Yeah. Yeah, recognizing the differences and celebrating the traditions of all these different countries, no, but not having this multiculturalist merging soup that's happening before our eyes right now. But I'm sure, like everything else, we're going to be learning from these situations that have been engineered, because they're not resonating with the majority of us. We know there's something wrong, even if we can't quite pinpoint it. But having this kind of conversation with you, Christopher, I mean, talk about diversity. My mind is always blown by the diverse range of topics, that you could speak about, and that in itself is a brilliant kind of compost for the mind. I know that we're going to want to invite you back on to talk about a lot of these topics in a bit more depth. If indeed you can find the time to do that, that won't be a waste of time. But
I will always have time for you, Luis.
thank
You're
you. That's
remember,
what I wanted to hear.
you're my British girlfriend. You with that sultry voice.
I
I
know.
just
I'm
could listen to
honored.
your voice all day long.
Well, we could. I know that we have spoken all day long before, and we could, and I'm sure we will again. But there's one more thing that I'd really like to take you and touch on, perhaps something that I think you hold quite close to heart as well, is this idea of if we're in a predatory world and we've always lived this way and we've always survived, where at the moment are our protectors? Where are the people that would be protecting our families and our communities? Have they disappeared? Where are they?
Well, this is my theory, and if people don't know, I'm a massage therapist by trade. That's my main occupation, and then I also do earth and building and earth and architecture about 30% of the time. But the nice thing about being a massage therapist is I'm actually a psychologist, like a non-trained psychologist. And what I've seen the last 17 years of doing this is that women rule the roost. And what I mean by that are men will only be as good as their women will force them to be. And this, I know this is like really what I'm saying is controversial, but just hear me out. Men are quite simple animals. All the heterosexual men that I know really want to please the women that are in their life. Okay. In fact, the majority of the tension that they experience is the fact that their women aren't happy. So I think the main social engineering attack has been on women, especially the last 100 years. And what I mean by that is we're taught that, the suffrage movement and the feminist movement and all these things have been this great push towards equality. But in some ways, yes, of course, but I think the overall trend of humanity is that there's much more equanimity in humanity as a whole. But what's coming out now, when I see over and over and over again, is the women that I know that have this ultra feminist bent. They're not deriving their power from actually being women. They're trying to derive a pseudo type of power of being more mannish. And how that actually destroys the protectors is, I'm sorry to say, men need to have support from their women. If a man doesn't have a support from his woman, if he doesn't feel supported by his woman, he's not going to do much to protect her. And I think the policymakers at the top know this. This is why the attack on the family unit in every way, like if you're just to take a humongous zoom out and take a snapshot, what has been attacked at the greatest extent on the planet? And it's family. Whether it's through inflation, whether it's through, double taxation, whether it's through the pushing of families off of homesteads into cities. To have a family in today's age is like two people have to be resolute in their consciousness to be able to maintain a family, because it's literally under attack. And if people don't understand that, then they go into the family life in a very naive way. And so I see the social engineering, what it's done is it said, okay, female, you're equal, but at the same time, if you don't look sexy, if you don't have this, if you don't have that, there's no way that you can be happy. It's taken the most important role in the world, which is being a good mother, especially during the formative years, and it has debased it. It has put it so low on the totem pole that's not even worth talking about. And it's exalted all these, like, go out, be an entrepreneur, make it happen. You're just, all these things that, yes, of course, that's good if that's natural. But, once again, we're talking about forcing something that doesn't need to be forced, right? So what I've seen in the men that I know, especially the men that live in the Western world, there's no incentive for them to actually take a wife. There's no incentive for them to actually be a protector. There's no incentive. Like the incentive of the protection has been taken away. And then you have all the other things like the weaponized anthropology making it sound like men are an absolute, pariah on the world. Like you look at any of these anthropological texts that are now being proven to be total bullshit, and it just makes all men sound like we were all Genghis Khan and rapers and all this stuff. And I have to tell you, me being a man, 40 years old, and the majority of my friends that I know, we're not like that. We're just not. And I know we're a small subsect of the larger population, but I'm here to say, fuck off, anthropologists. We're not that. And what I've seen is that there's always this promotion, this anti-male promotion that's been out there, especially in Western cultures, that does not give any dignity to the traditional roles that men have. And what are those traditional roles? One is to protect, and the other is to provide. And because the women of the world, especially in the Western world, have really bit on that hook and have taken it, the incentive, the actual emotional incentive for men to be a provider and to be a protector has gone away. And I see it as a really, really, really big problem. And what's wonderful for me now is I live in a Hispanic culture and the family units stay together. And I live in a community where people are much, much happier in family life here than I ever saw in the United States. Like in literal family life, where like the parents actually take part in the children's lives and the mothers do stay at home, and on Sundays, people go to the local ferias, and like the community does actually interact. I'm not talking about, the urban dispersal that you see in the United States where nobody knows their neighbors and there's very little interaction in community. And this is really where it comes down to it. I really believe that there has to be a wake up, that women have to understand that the surrogate father state of the country, the nation, the government will not protect them. The actual history bears out that governments are always complicit in what's known as democide, and that's genocide by government. And once women know this historical perspective and know, oh my God, the men that are around me are actually, they're my protectors. It's not the police. It's not the army. It's not all this other stuff that's way, way far away. You have to look at this from a permaculture perspective. You have to deal with zone 0 and zone 1 first. That's what's closest to you. This is the first line of defense. And understand that we do live in a predatory world, which means you do need to be defended. And to honor that in your men and to require it. Like honoring and requiring is very similar, And so this is something that I really believe is the first step for the wake up of the world. Like people, especially women, need to go, holy schmoly, the men in my life really are my brothers, my father, my actual father, my husband, my lover, whoever. If worse comes to worse, they're the ones here to protect. And I'm not saying that women can't protect themselves. I'm not saying that there isn't like the Ronda Rouseys of the world that can kick any guy's ass. I'm not saying that. Of course, there are those outliers. But I'm saying in general, men are bigger and stronger than women are, and we're more aggressive. And so that gives us an advantage when it comes to defense. We can just move more mass. We can take a harder hit. We can take a tumble much easier physiologically than women can. And for as much as we're in cloud-based computing and all these jobs where we don't move our bodies, at the end of the day, the policymakers always use violence or the threat of violence. So what does that mean? That means that your first line of defense has to be physical. It's not just a psychological thing. You actually have to have the capacity to physically defend yourself. And so that means usually, unless you're just one of these outlying women that knows how to use guns and all these other things, or a martial artist, like if you're in the majority of, the demographic of most women out there, you need you need men around you that can protect you, and you don't need to be related to them. They could be somebody in your community. It could be a lover. It could be a husband. But I really want this to get out. Like, I feel very strongly about it. And wherever I've been in the world, I went to Europe a few years ago, and I felt so sorry for the majority of the women there because they had never experienced chivalry. And I was floored. I was dating this beautiful woman, and she's a 10 on all accounts, and a man had never opened a door for her. And we were in this really crappy part of town, and I remember telling her not to go to her car because I sensed danger. And I went to the car and got what we needed out of the car, and I came back, and she just had this huge smirk on her face. And I was like, "Why are you smirking?" And she's like, "No man's ever protected me like that." And she was 37 years old. I'm like, "What? What are you talking about?" Like, I couldn't believe it. And part of the reason why men aren't doing that anymore is because it's not honored. It's not appreciated. Like, I've opened doors for women that were insulted by it. I'm not trying to demean you. I'm not trying to make you less than or make you submissive, like so many of the bullshit stereotypes that are out there are not true. They're engineered. So I know I'm old school in the way I think, and I believe in chivalry, and I believe in men being gentlemen, and I believe in people acting with dignity. And I know the men that I respect in myself, we have dignity. And how do we treat our women? We actually protect them. We actually provide for them. We actually do whatever we can to support them in whatever way we can. But at the same time, all of us, we have women that require that. They have an incredible sense of self-image, and they're not distorted by the roles that are projected on them by society. All of them have gone back to much more of a traditional way of seeing themselves. So that's really where I think the protectors have gone. I think the incentive has been taken away by women not honoring the men in the role and the capacity in which they best function.
That's really interesting. Yet again, you've opened up another treasure chest, I think, of themes that I'd love to explore further with you, and I'm sure we're going to be able to do that. What I'd like to do now is be able to invite the listeners and the people that are able to contact us at the Full Circle Project. They can listen to the conversation that we've had and sit back and think about it. I think there's a lot of food for thought there, a lot to digest. And write in with any questions and comments that you've got for Christopher, because I'm sure that will be interesting to see how people are able to interpret what you're saying. I think it's going to lead to many, many more interesting conversations, which I feel also will be able to be implemented by people. You've got a lot of practical advice. Again, we've hardly touched on those things, because your interest and your experience are so broad. So, let's see. Is there anything else you'd like to add at this point, Christopher, before we wrap up for today? Anything that you want to add
Sure.
there?
Yeah, I'm doing a podcast now. I think I have about 18 or 19 under my belt. I'm still a rookie, but I love learning. So I have this tendency whenever I want to learn something, I usually go straight to the horse's mouth and get to know the people that I want to learn from. So I on my podcast I interview innovators. I interview people, doctors, pretty much people that are a benefit to humanity. So, because I want to have the cliff notes of how to get stuff done. So, yeah, I invite people to my website, biocharisma.com, and then I have the Biocharisma podcast, and a lot of the full circle, folk are actually, on the docket for to be interviewed, like Max Egan and Zen Gardner, and all these types of people. I've interviewed Ole a couple times, like just really awesome people. So um, I'm a I want people to come to my website. I'm writing new copy for it and putting new pictures because it's a solution based website. Like I want people when they come to get the sense that, oh, okay, we can fix our immediate surroundings, and we can, through a grassroots initiative, actually get a lot of things done. I feel like I'm Thomas Paine, like at heart. Like you get things done through a grassroots movement. So you don't work from the outside in, you work from the inside out. So that's really where I'd like people to go. And on Facebook, I have the Biocharisma is on Facebook, and the Biocharisma podcast is on iTunes, and it will soon to be on Stitcher and all those types of things. So those are another areas where people can figure out, or at least access my information.
Oh, well, bless you for making all that available to us. It's incredibly interesting and a great body of work. So look forward very much, Christopher Gardner, to having you back with us, and thank you, and all those wonderful sound effects that I can hear in the background.
Yeah,
All
I
the
know.
tropical creatures there. I don't know if you can hear the bird song here, but I hope everybody really gets a touch and a taste of what your life's about, and thank you so much for sharing it with us today.
Oh, my pleasure, Luis.